Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of New Haven's CSO Long-Term Control Plan Update Public Meeting. This meeting is intended to summarize the most recent update to the Long-Term Control Plan prepared by Jacobs Engineering on behalf of the authority. My name is Tom Scroy. I'm the Engineering Director and have been since 2005. Helping me present today is the Manager of Design, Mario Riccosi, and Project Engineer Nick Stevens. I'd also like to recognize or acknowledge Gary Zarelix in the audience here, Operations Director, Joe McGalley, Deputy Operations Director, Dan Lynch, Larry Murphy from Jacobs, and DEP is also present, Yvonne Hall and Syed. I'm going to give a little background. Here's a general agenda of the meeting. I'm going to give a little background on the program, provide what I hope to be some interesting history on the City of New Haven's sewer system, help everyone understand the purpose of a combined sewer and what a combined sewer overflow is, because that's kind of important to understand what this program's all about. I'm going to briefly go over the history of the City of New Haven's long-term control plan and highlight the fantastic progress that we've made through the years. I'm going to talk about the strategy of the long-term control plan and how it incorporates a careful balance of both green and gray infrastructure. As you may be aware, in 2005, the authority underwent a regionalization process. As a result, we inherited the City of New Haven's long-term control plan, which had been developed in the late 90s and approved by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. At that time, it was just the DEP in 2001. This plan had been meticulously crafted over several years through collaboration between the city leaders, the DEP, consultants, and numerous public workshops. Its primary objective was to establish a plan and timeline for elimination of combined sewer overflows. That term I'll define later in this program. Before this plan came into effect, the city had already initiated a storm sewer construction and separation efforts, primarily focusing on the downtown area and flood-prone regions. In the late 90s, public meetings were held to garner support for this challenging and costly initiative aimed at improving our water bodies and the overall environment. Moving forward to 2005, the authority continued to carry out significant projects initiated by the city, including construction of the Truman Storage Tank, a massive 5 million gallon storage facility between the Truman School, beneath the Truman School parking lot, and the Morris Cove Pump Station, and various sewer separation projects throughout the city. Around this time, DEP sought to formalize a plan through a consent order. This order would outline the projects to be completed and establish a timeline for their implementation. Collaborating with our consultant, CH2M Hill at the time, now Jacobs, we updated the long-term control plan and conducted public information sessions to communicate the changes and set a clear path for completing the work. This update was pivotal because it shifted the previous program, which centered around complete separation of stormwater and sewers, to the program we have today, which emphasizes optimizing flow to the treatment plant and maximizing the capacity in our system. The proposed changes at that time documented an increase in the plant's design capacity from the existing 100 million gallons a day of wet weather flow to 187 projected capacity. The plan was initiated in 2009 and subsequently amended through 2012 to incorporate feedback from the DEP and the public, especially in the terms of environmental justice concerns. Finally, the plan was ultimately approved by DEP in late 2012. It's essential to grasp that the long-term control plan is a dynamic document. It's meant to evolve and adapt in changing times and embrace new technologies. Both DEP and the authority recognized this importance and mandated that the plan be formally updated every 5 years. Our last public presentation occurred during the 2017 update. The 2017 update primarily focused on the collection system conveyance and allowed us to leverage years of flow monitoring data to successfully model and quantify the impacts of completed projects while identifying new projects in the collection system that could have cost-effectively reduced CSOs. Now, 5 years later, we are here today presenting the most recent update to the long-term control plan. Similar to the last update, our approach remains largely unchanged. This update centers on progress achieved thus far, fine-tuning near-term projects and refining the order of future projects. In the course of the presentation, my colleagues Mario Riccozzi and Nick Stevens will highlight the upcoming projects. Formed in 2005, like I said before, the member communities of Hamden, Woodbridge, New Haven, and East Haven, the business was directed under the 9-member board of directors appointed by each community, four of which are from New Haven, 2 East Haven, 2 Hamden, and 1 Woodbridge. We serve approximately 230,000 customers and have a staff that manages over 500 miles of sewer, 30 pump stations, a treatment plant with the capacity of 40 million gallons a day on normal days and 100 million gallons a day at wet weather flow. I like to put this slide in here. Gary Zarelik's here. He's often leads tours of the plant. I highly encourage you to take a tour. The first thing he does is bring you to our Headworks building, which has a bar screen on it, and it has all this good stuff there. He notes appropriately that we are not a manufacturing facility. All that stuff comes from any one of you that might be in our 4-member community, and it's things that you may accidentally or purposely put down your sewer system. Needless to say, it's challenging work. Our operations group is led by a group of dedicated licensed operators, making sure our effluent meets permitted standards, customer service, diligently process customer billing, fielding questions, or reviewing bills with our customers. The industrial pre-treatment team is responsible for verifying that industrial users adhere to discharge standards and oversee the proper maintenance of grease traps in restaurants. Our collection system staff maintains the 500 miles of collection system, cleaning, videoing, responding to emergencies. Our engineering department manages consultants and contractors involved in our capital projects, manages our GIS system and maintains it, reviews all proposed developments in the 4 communities, ensuring that they comply with our standards. We have 8 on-call contractors that are ready at a moment's notice to be dispatched on any emergency that occurs. So let's step back. What is a combined sewer? If the group was larger, I'd ask the group, how many of you know what a combined sewer is? Well, I'm going to explain that to you, so can move on. So under normal days flow, here's a typical sewer, and you'll get the discharge from your home that's coming from your washing machine, it's coming from your showers you take, any use of water in your home's going into your sewer system, and it's coming into our system. And following the path, ultimately, to get back to the treatment plant. Follows a path like that. Then it rains. And when it rains in a combined sewer system, the pipes, not only from your home, but from maybe roof leaders from the home and buildings, could be from parking lots and roads, come into the system and ultimately fill the pipe up. And when it fills the pipe up, we have relief areas in the pipe called combined sewer overflows, and they're located, and basically that's our weir right there, that I'll show you actually pictures of later on. The flow, when it reaches the top of that weir, overflows and goes into the water course. And this is important because if you didn't have these relieves, if you close this sewer off here, this pipe would fill completely and ultimately back up to your home and onto the road. So there was a real purpose for having these overflows. It basically kept the sewage in the pipes as most of the time it could, and then when it rained, it provided a relief. So why do we have these? It's an evolution process. We inherited a system that's been here for a long, long time. There's a map of New Haven in 1872. You can see it's sparsely developed. I think the toilet was invented just about 15 years before that. I Googled that, so if it's not right, it's because Google gave me bad information. But rest assured, at that time, I don't think toilets really became widely in use until around 1900. So most of the pipes on this map were probably collecting waste from the roads and maybe from some of the homes with water use, but you had horses, you probably had a large mess, so the rain fell on the ground in the roads, went into the catch basin, and went out into the pipes that we have here. So back then, there was really, 4 or 5 major pipes, fairly large, that took flow out to the West River. This is the West River, and here's the harbor here. And this is an interesting photo. This is and note that there's salt grass being harvested in the West River there. This painting is from 1849, done by, I don't know how famous he is, but he's famous in Connecticut, I guess, Frederick Edwin Church, and oil on canvas. You can actually see this painting, the original. It's at the Museum of American History in New Britain. I've actually seen it, gone with my mom a couple of times. It's a beautiful painting, so I encourage you to go up there and check it out. But note that the salt grass is being harvested there. So here's a map of 1892. As you can see, New Haven's quickly growing. These are all combined sewer pipes at the time. I'm highlighting all the outfalls in this slide right now. So you're seeing ones appear on the West River. Now you're seeing one appear down at the harbor, up in the Mill River area there. And you can see another one, a couple coming out on the Fairhaven area, and ultimately ending up in the Quinnipiac River there. So this is what we had in 1892. Lots of outfalls, combined sewer going directly in with no treatment at all. Remember the salt grass that I talked about that was being harvested? That was over here in the West River. Well, someone must have decided that that was getting pretty messy at the time, and they had to do something about it. So they decided to build somewhere around in the late 1800s, an interceptor to pick up all of those outfalls so that they could get water into the harbor and not into the West River. When they did that, they built an above-grade sewer that looked just like this. This one was actually built in Philadelphia. We don't have photos of the ones in New Haven. At least I couldn't find any. That this is in Philadelphia, but rest assured, this pipe is constructed exactly like that. Similar size, very robust, has maybe 5 to 8 courses of brick on the lower side, and I think 3 to 5 courses of brick on the top. Very strong, but when they built it, they put in overflow weirs at each of these locations. So during normal flows, the flow is coming down and coming all the way down into the harbor, down at the bottom here. But during heavy rain events, the system was allowed to overflow into the West River like it used to. But that must have temporarily solved some of that problem with the West River becoming somewhat polluted. This is actually a an engineered drawing used for construction of one of our sewers in New Haven. As you can see, it was very similar to the one that was constructed in that previous photo. And here's one of those weirs that I was talking about. This is an overflow weir that's where the CSO occurs, the combined sewer overflow occurs. So just on the other side of that is the sewage that's flowing by on a normal day and getting transported to the pump station or treatment plant. During heavy rains, water is allowed to come over that weir and come toward you in this photo and out to the outfall, which is behind you. In this particular case, we were actually making a repair to that. It's tough to see in this photo, but this is where the sewage is. This sewage is flowing left to right and going down the pipe in the Boulevard Interceptor. I think I might have mentioned that Boulevard Interceptor was constructed above grade. It since has been covered, obviously, by El Grasso Boulevard. So that right now, to this day, that sewage, that combined sewer still exists under the road there. So here's that same map. In this particular case, I positioned some of the new infrastructure that was being built over time. So between 1937 and 1939, the first treatment plant was built, and it was built down there on Boulevard where the sound school is. About the same time, the East Street pump station was built. Actually, I call it a pump station because it is now. It's the East Street plant was built at that time. You can see where that star is located. The Union Street pump station didn't get constructed until 1983, which is somewhat amazing because there was still a small portion of the city of New Haven's combined sewer that was allowed to go directly out with untreated. And the treatment plant located on East Shore was built in 1946, upgraded in 75, expanded in 85. When it was expanded in 85, that's when these two pump stations, Boulevard and East Street, plants, actually, the two plants turned into pump stations. And this next graphic I have, well, actually, this is interesting to note too. This is the existing waterfront today. As you can see, much of it was filled in the 30s and 40s, I think into the 50s. So it's kind of interesting. This is what we have today. We have our major infrastructure. Boulevard Pump Station is a major pump station, around 30 million gallons a day capacity, peak wet weather. Pumps toward the East Street pump station. Together, those two stations pump in a twin force main that goes across the harbor here. And that force main turns into a 48-inch force main, along with the gravity main that comes from Fairhaven and above, combines with the 42-inch gravity main that comes from Morris Cove, and all the flow ends up at the East Shore treatment plant and discharges to the harbor after undergoing primary and secondary treatment. So that's what we have today. Union Pump Station is also shown over here. That just gets you over the railroad, and ultimately that flow is double pumped. It ends up going into East Street Pump Station. So let's go back. The original long-term control plan approved in 2003, last updated in 2018, and updated every 5 years. The ultimate goal is to remove CSOs in the 2-year, 6-hour design storm. So that's an agreed-upon design storm that was negotiated early on in the original long-term control plan, and our goal is to have 0 CSOs during that design storm by 2036. Where are these CSOs right now? There's 11 CSO outfalls, 3 in the harbor, 4 in West River, 2 Mill River, and 2 Quinnipiac River. What kind of progress? This is a nice little slide to show some of the very simple way to measure progress. Back in 2003, in that long-term control plan, there were 26 CSO outfalls. We've worked over time and reduced those CSOs by 15 and bringing it down to 11. So great progress has been made on that. What's the strategy? The strategy really hasn't changed much since that 2011 update. It's maximize conveyance and storage in the collection system, maximize flow to the treatment plant, reduce CSOs as much as we can by modifying existing regulators and structures, and ultimately increasing capacity at the treatment plant. There's two tools in our tool belt that probably weren't in the original long-term control plan, or they were not stated as strongly as they would be now. One would be green infrastructure and that tool that we have to use, and the other would be the term resiliency. Everyone remembers Storm Sandy. They probably know exactly what they were doing when they were getting the reports from New York City being underwater, and if you're along the coast here, you were very aware of it. That kind of changed the game in the Northeast on how we have to design for these storms. One thing is there's a lot of federal money that became available because of these storms, and we took advantage of that. In this graphic here, we have our Fort Hale pump station that's located in New Haven, and this is one of 4 stations in East Haven that we elevated. All of these 2 stations are in flood areas, and in this particular case, all the equipment was in the lower level there, and if you ever got a storm surge, that station would go down and not be useful. Now, the generator is located well above any flooding, and all the equipment below is pumping equipment that's designed to be in the water, and this station will continue to operate in the event of a flooding situation. This one, along with the 4 in East Haven, these were, each of these stations were $1 million projects, and this was a 75% grant that we got through the FEMA program to make them more resilient. Over here, this doesn't look very fancy here, but this is our large boulevard pump station, the one that I talked about that handles 30 million gallons a day. Flow, this is flood proofing. So when we get significant storm surge, this station has actually barriers that get installed in the doorways, and then the outside of the structure was reinforced to withstand any flooding. So this station will stay functioning during any flooding events. So that's some of the things we're doing with resiliency. Green infrastructure. We like to be a good neighbor and a good example. This is our own parking lot at 260 East Street. This is kind of a sample project. Even though we're not in a combined sewer area at 260 East Street, we do discharge to the storm sewer. So we developed a green infrastructure parking lot. Basically, the flow goes into these bioswales, and these plants that are there now that were just planted have grown significantly. They uptake most of the water in normal rainstorms, and during heavier rainstorms, it's allowed to overflow into the storm sewer that's located in the street. This one we're very proud of. This is the first bioswale ever constructed in the city of New Haven, and it was done under the teamwork of the city of New Haven, the Greater New Haven WPCA, and the DEP. This is the first bioswale, to my knowledge, that was incorporated, that was used in the Clean Water Fund, that was allowed to be eligible in the Clean Water Fund. And we built over 90 of them in the West River watershed basin. So they take flow up in those, in your common rainstorm, the ones that are too heavy, these do a really nice job in taking that first flush of rain out of the system. So it benefits not only the storm systems in New Haven if they're installed in a storm system area, but they benefit us in the combined sewer area. So just kind of quickly reviewing the 2018 update, long-term control plan update, that was the last one. That one we focused more on the collection system. We focused on short-term improvements to reduce CSOs. These were raising weirs anything that we could do that kept flow in the existing system. And we were able to do that because by that time, we had many years of CSO monitoring. And with that knowledge, we were able to close many CSOs, and we were able to raise a lot of those weirs at the CSO outfalls. We also embarked on an aggressive cleaning campaign where we cleaned over 20 miles of large diameter sewers. We took out 3,000 cubic yards of debris. That debris now that's removed, that's additional capacity that those pipes have to handle flow. We made some improvements to our pump stations to increase flow, maximize flow to the treatment plant. And one of the unique things we did in New Haven back in 2008, it's worked out very well, is we required developers to do exactly what we're required to do. A DEP and the consent order requires us to handle that 2-year, 6-hour design storm. So when a developer comes in and they want to connect back into the combined sewer with their storm drainage, they can do so, but they have to retain that 2-year, 6-hour storm on site. And together, all the projects since that time, it's been over 120 developments, including a lot of Yale projects, that have basically provided over 5.7 million gallons of CSO storage. So that's flow that's not coming to us anymore. That's flow here that's not coming to us that used to come to us, and it's being taken up in these they could be bioswales, but most of the time they're almost like septic systems, below grade systems that capture the water, allow it to fill up. New Haven's a great community for infiltrating water. It's very coarse sands, so it really is a perfect marriage in New Haven to be able to put in these infiltrators. So, like I said, these short-term projects that we started in 2018, we identified this is all of them. I'm not going to list them all, but you can see we closed many CSOs. We raised a lot of regulators. Every time we do this work, we go in and do this stuff. We take photos, we document, we send it up to DEP, and we make everyone aware that we're making progress on our program. This is the best slide of all because this is what actually proves where we're going with our program. I got to get through a little technical stuff on this. This is a model. The model is run in various scenarios. And as you can see, the model is run on 5 different years, basically. In 1997 condition was the conditions of the sewer system as it existed that day, or in that year, and so on, 13, 14, 18, and 20. So as we made improvements, we had to run the model again to see what the results were. But we couldn't just plug in any rainstorm to that, or any given year to that, because every year is different. So we have our consultants and DEP and the authority all agree on what a typical year would be. So they look at all the years, and I think we went back into the 40s and 50s, all the way up until present, and we determined which one of those years had the most typical rainfall. And as it turns out, it's the 1967 year. So you can see the rain graphic on the bottom. These are the rainstorms that occurred in 1967. That year is plugged into the same model for those 5 scenarios, so you know you're getting consistent results. So if you go back to 1997, our CSO volume was about 115 million gallons in that year. And as you can see, as we made improvements, 13, it drops to 60. In 14, it's down to 37. In 18, it's 19.7. And in 2020, it's 18.9. And over time, it's more and more difficult and more expensive to get that number to go down. And we're making efforts to do that. The next update we have to this will be when we update the long-term control plan. The next time I talk to you will be 5 years from now. In that update, we'll be running the hydraulic models, we'll be plugging in all the projects we've done since then, and we'll have another little column here, or another little graph to show what progress we've made. We know this is true, though, because we actually look at the flow. We have flow monitoring information that we look at all the time, and our typical rainstorms, as long as we remove the outliers, the years we have very little rain and the ones we have a significant amount of rain, we are coming in around that 18 to 20 million gallons a day, so 20 million gallons a year. So we know this model is fairly accurate. Like I said before, so right now we've reduced CSOs by nearly 70%. That's pretty significant. There's a mountain climber here, Nick Stevens, who's going to speak later. He's a mountain climber. He likes this graphic. But it really is true. If you're climbing a mountain, the higher you get, the more difficult it gets. It's similar to our program. The closer we get to removing CSOs, the more difficult it gets, the more expensive it gets. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mario Riccozzi, our manager of design, and he's going to go through the near-term projects that we're working on and take it from there. Is there any questions on the program as it existed and how we've gotten to this point before I turn it over to Mario? And then we can have a separate questions. If there's not, I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it. So where are we and where are we going and why are we doing this? So the 2022 update. The major strategy is to bring and maximize flow to the treatment plant. That is from back in 2011, and we did the phase 1 work at the treatment plant where we really installed the backbone necessary to make these improvements in the future. We upgraded the electrical system, we upgraded the odor control system, we also excuse me, increased the number of vessels to manage the solids, because the more flow you bring in, the more solids you end up with. So we put those all in place, we monitor that, and then we say, what is the next step? What are the other projects that we have that we're going to be doing? And as part of a long-term control plan update, you really want to look at the sequencing. Just like your own home, you don't want to say, well, we're going to do all these projects all at once, because you won't be able to live there while you're doing all the projects, or it'll be very, very uncomfortable. So we try to sequence them to build and operate systems that have the flow coming to them that'll make them useful. We don't want to build a building and put in pumps that aren't going to operate for 10 years or 5 years. Makes no sense. They will be old and obsolete before we can get to use them. So as part of this 2022 long-term control plan update, we determined that there are 2 more phases that we feel are efficient and effective. The phase 2 e-shore improvements, which would be the next work happening at the treatment plant, will involve wet weather flow conveyance, and will also involve an upgrade to the odor control system. When we did the odor control system as part of phase 1, we left capacity in the building for an additional odor control vessel for the treatment. And we know it's time now to increase the odor control that's going on there. So with the wet weather treatment, we know we're building capacity out in the system. We're storing more, as Tom said. We're also improving the pumping capacity out in the system, so we'll be able to bring more to the treatment plant, so we want to make sure that we can do that. Whenever you have a wet weather event at a treatment plant like ours, it'll receive primary treatment. Most of the solids are removed, biological, the VOD is reduced, and then we disinfect that wet weather flow. The other flows do receive the full secondary treatment, so that have biological removal of nitrogen. During the wet weather events, it upsets the secondary treatment. So it becomes difficult. So by increasing the flow and providing a route around the secondary treatment and still treating that by disinfecting it, this will leave the nitrogen removal as more of a steady state. The phase 3 improvements will involve really after our pump stations get upgraded, it'll allow us to increase the preliminary treatment, provide additional primary treatment, and also we're looking at chemically enhanced primary treatment and improvements to the biological treatment, some hydraulic improvements through the plant. We really did quite a bit of studies on what does sea level rise look like and how is that going to affect the treatment plant and the operations. We know we were able to operate during Storm Sandy, but if you now add sea level rise to that, what happens? So we've incorporated, as part of that model through the plant, we realized we need to make some adjustments in the future when we bring up the flows in order to continue to treat that properly. And we're able to do that now by planning it so that it's not a big cost later on and it's not a surprise. In the future, long-term control plan updates, we're going to look at what did we do, how did that work out, are there new treatment technologies out there that we can utilize, are there new natural systems that we can utilize, what resiliency conditions do we have to meet, and also how sustainable is what we are doing. So, as Tom said, the focus was the treatment plant at East Shore. This is the current East Shore master plan. If you attended the city plan meeting about a month ago or so, you would have seen this up on the screen. This is essentially the same master plan with a few exceptions that was presented in the long-term control plan back in 2010 when we did the phase 1 wet weather update. And we do this so that we know we're not putting a building someplace or tank that we then have to move later on. So under the current scenario and the changes that occurred from the prior long-term control plan, master plan at the treatment plant, is a process air compressor facility. This is currently under construction, or we bid it. We're about to go to construction hopefully next year. It's a brick building similar to the other brick buildings that you'll see out there. It is not a new process. Currently, this is the East Shore Park where the soccer fields are at the bottom of the page. Currently, there's some towers that are all in white. It's all fiberglass. And there's piping that you'll see that runs across the tanks up in the air. That piping leaks. It makes noise. It's very difficult to get to. When the piping was installed in the mid-90s, it wasn't a big deal because nitrogen removal was important, but it wasn't quite as important as we now know it is. So if you had to take half the treatment plant offline and reduce your nitrogen removal for a couple of months so that you can repair the pipe, it wasn't as big a deal. So now what we're doing is we're installing the piping above the walkways that you see going down the center and these little walkways so that you'll be able to get to that if there is an adjustment that's needed without having to take the tanks offline so we can continue treatment. We also have a collection system maintenance facility. It's a garage that's currently under construction. That is where the cleaning of the collection system is brought to be dewatered so that that can be disposed of. We've added, and Nick will touch on, a fog receiving facility. That's the fats, oils, and greases from the restaurants, and an emergency generator fuel storage, which he'll go over in detail. The only other component that's new is gravity thickener number 3 that's listed. We're not positive that's necessary. At this point, as we did the mass balance throughout the system and looking at chemically enhanced primary treatment, it's right on the borderline. Do we need another gravity thickener or not? So for this portion of the plan at this stage, we're including it. There'll be 2 more cycles of long-term control plan updates before we get to the point of actually constructing or not constructing that gravity thickener number 2, that we can monitor the improvements that were made, the amount and the effectiveness of the chemically enhanced primary treatment, and how the solids are removed. We're also adding grit removal at our major pump stations and improving that, so we expect that some of those solids will be removed before it ever gets to the treatment plant. But we at least have a placeholder on site. Original components that are still proposed is the preliminary treatment building. That's where the first cleaning happens of the sewage that comes in. Rags are removed, grit is removed, the heavier material. We currently have 3 covered primary treatment plants. This proposes to add a 4th because of the amount of flow that's coming to the plant. That will be part of the wet weather, so that's the flow that's not going into the harbor over the weirs. In the near term is the wet weather disinfection. So at a point, once we exceed the capacity of our secondary treatment, the biological treatment for nitrogen removal, rather than upsetting that process, we'll take the flow that's already been treated with primary treatment, we'll disinfect it using chlorine is the proposal right now, which we expect will continue, and then it'll go around the outside of the tank. Currently, part of that flow goes through the tank through another pipe, and it's very difficult to get to and maintain, and it doesn't have the capacity for the future flows. Those are the changes from the original master plan. So that's where we sit now as far as treatment goes. Projects that we have underway right now, there's a Trumbull Street Phase 2 sewer separation project in the downtown, which I'll cover. Orchard Street sewer separation project, also near the St. Rayfields campus of Yale New Haven Hospital. There is a project coming up for the Fairhaven CSO improvements. That's the next phase of that. Our East Street pump station that I'll cover, and I already discussed the process air compressor, but I'll give you a little more information on that. But you can see we're working all around the city in a number of locations. Sewer separation was really proposed by the city back in the 1980s. They did quite a bit of it. They had a plan put together as to where we should size, what pipes should go in what locations, what sizes, so that we can get the stormwater out to the harbor and avoid it mixing within the combined sewers. These 2 projects, the Yale campus Trumbull Street project is immediately north of Trumbull Street. I don't know if you've been in New Haven long enough. I believe it was in around 2015, 2012, we closed part of Trumbull Street, which is the exit and entrance into Yale's campus, in order to install a separation project. That was to connect the Farmington Canal Greenway storm drain that had been installed over time into the State Street storm drain that had also been installed as part of redevelopment projects. So that little piece, even though there was work that was done, still was a combined area. So now we've separated that. That allowed us to close one of the CSOs, combined sewer overflow, so no longer the water from that area overflows the sewage from that area. The Yale campus project is a little unique. It's our phase 2. Now that we are able to, and everyone understands better how bioswales work in the city of New Haven and how the soils react, and working with DEP and the city, we have orange lines. This is Whitney Avenue right here. This is the Peabody Museum, if you're familiar with that, Sachem Street, Pearl Street. This is a connection, again, into that State Street main that was installed many years ago in the 1980s when State Street was redeveloped. So we're completing this connection through Bradley Street and Whitney Avenue. Separation projects have occurred to the north, to the west, and to the south, so this is the last of those separations. But when we did the planning study in 2009, we kept these areas that are in green, we held those for a future phase. We felt that there should be enough capacity in the soils to allow those to be done with bioswales and infiltrating catch basins. So with studying the work the city has done as far as the bioswales around the city, work we did with Yale School of Forestry along with the city, we know as long as the soils are proper and what you find in most of the city, those work very well. So the areas that you see in the green dashes will not have the piping that would have traditionally been put there, but will have the natural designed, nature-based solutions. In addition, the piping that is shown in orange is slightly reduced in size because we've converted from a traditional catch basin where the water goes into the drain and right into the pipe and out as quickly as possible. We're using the same infiltration that the soils have in New Haven. The water will go in and will soak into the soil and recharge the groundwater instead of going out immediately. The Orchard Street separation project, which will connect this Chapel Street to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which was developed by the DOT many years ago. It will connect those storm drainage. Kensington Avenue was redeveloped and piping ends there and reconnects into the combined. So there's a lot of work done upstream, there's work done downstream. The missing links in the middle are the toughest part, and Tom said it is challenging. Well, these missing links are very challenging. The piping is about 48 inches in diameter, so I can't walk through it, but I can crawl through it. We did walk through the ones on Trumbull Street. We've done this in conjunction with the hospital. They're building a bed project that is extremely large and is moving quickly. So they are doing part of the separation work themselves as part of their redevelopment, and we're putting the piece in on Orchard Street. So that work is just starting and will be continuing for the next couple of years. This is the process air compressor facility, a small building over here, and the piping, trying to show diagrammatically what is going to occur over the walkways. All the piping below the water level was done as part of the phase one, so that the amount of time that any tank would have to be taken offline just to make connections is minimized. So we tried to take advantage of what we were doing in phase one by adding walls in the system. Just to give you an idea of the size, this is your standard human of, like, I think it's 5'10" high. These are the blowers or the compressors that provide air to feed the bugs that are digesting the nitrogen. Anyone who's familiar with the area, this is East Shore Parkway in the cul-de-sac. This is in green because we have an easement across that. There was some confusion, I think, at the city plan meeting. Originally, the city owned all of this property, but in 2005, they transferred the properties that were the treatment plant, the pump stations, the pipes, over to the new Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. When we went to do the phase one work at the treatment plant, we realized, oh, we own the street and the city owned part of the treatment plant site. So we were able to do a land swap. So there was some concern of access for a walkway or some sort of a trail that I know has been in the works for many years of getting into East Shore Park. That is all within the control of the city, that access, in case there was a question. East Street Pump Station. Tom showed that as originally a treatment plant. It was a primary plant. If you're familiar with Long Wharf Maritime Center, beautiful building, office building, this is the parking garage. Here's the office building. Nice walkway around. There's the old rusty scupper near it that's proposed for redevelopment, I believe. So this is an existing pump station, about a 30 million gallon per day capacity. In order to improve the flow into the treatment plant on the East Shore, and this picks up flow all the way from up in Hamden, we're increasing the pumping capacity. We're improving the flow through the plant, and also improving the removal of solids and before it ever gets to the treatment plant. So we're staying essentially within the existing footprint. This garage gets a little bit bigger so we can have 2 dumpsters in there instead of 1. And this is an operations building which keeps its current footprint. This is, below here is a section, what the view would be like if you were in the daycare right here and you walked outside. So we talked about resiliency, and you see this line here. That is what we're building to. That's our design line. Normally, if you were to build a house in a floodplain, you'd have to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood. We have higher standards of 3 feet above the 100-year flood. So we have to protect to that level to account for sea level rise. We also, if we are going to store chemicals or fuel, we have to remain above the 500-year flood. So we're significantly higher than anything that you would see. So when Tom showed you the picture of the pump stations that were elevated, that's the reason why. We're higher than the flood level would be. We try to make it look as good as we can when we do that. But this is an emergency generator. It's actually 2 generators within an enclosure. So we, baffle the noise. We keep it elevated above this magic line, the design line. And we're doing this so that we can maintain the pumping station's operations during the storm, if we had a major storm. And we have it up high so that we can always recover quickly. We also have electrical systems that are on the first floor, so we're expanding the electrical room that's on the second floor. It's actually a control room. We're making it all our electrical equipment, so items that should not be submerged in water will be up in elevation, so they'll be significantly above the flood level. And then we're keeping this low, and we are adding solar panels above this roof area. It does a couple of things. One, it gives us a little bit of alternative energy, more of a demonstration project, because the pumps, we couldn't have a solar field large enough to manage the amount of power the pumps use. But it will help to maintain all of our controls while we're in transition to the generators when we need to. And that's essentially what we're going to be looking at. So we're doing it in phases. There's potential in the future of another building in the middle here, but that's something that we're going to be evaluating in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Stevens to talk about his favorite project. Yes. Ooh, hold on one second. We're recording this so that we would like it on.
Yes, you mentioned odor control improvements. When was the last time you had odor control improvements? And what is after you do the odor control improvements, how long do you think it'll last?
Okay, so we did a major upgrade in and around 2015, 16, 17 in the phase 1 improvements. We have since done another odor, we're doing an odor evaluation currently because we've gotten a couple of complaints. So we're evaluating that currently. And the next major odor improvement, I believe this is scheduled for start of design a couple of years from now. And we're looking at methods that we can do in the intermediate timeframe to make those improvements. We've gone through a rebalancing of the system. If you can think of the odor control system, although there's a central building and where all the equipment is kept, the piping goes throughout the entire complex. You've probably seen it. It's up in the air and it's gray. That has different legs that go down to different tanks. So we've done a rebalancing of that because we might have been drawing a lot of air from one tank that may not have had as much of an odor as another tank that really needed a little more air. So
Okay, that's
we've
fine,
gone
thank
through
you.
that.
Hopefully, the next odor control improvement will be much better than the 2015 odor control improvement. I've been living in the Cove since 2009. The odor has not improved, even with your 2015 odor control improvement. My second question is, you mentioned...
If I can just, when you do have an issue, if you would call our emergency number, 203-466-5260, I think that's the right number.
Yes, it is correct.
Okay, please, and this way they can log it and they can try and figure out what's going on right
Okay.
then and there. Don't wait till Monday. That's a
Great, thank you.
24-hour number, please. Thank you.
Okay, my second question is that you mentioned projects all over the city. You did not mention the East Shore pumping station on Lighthouse Park, or any improvements there. Not on Lighthouse Park, I mean on the corner of Lighthouse Road and Townsend Ave.
The Morris Cove Pump Station?
Yes.
It looks like a home right next to
Yes.
Dean Street, at the
Yes,
end of
is that
Dean
going to be
Street.
raised? And
So-
also, what about the pumps that pump out Morris Creek? Are those going to be moved and a permanent solution will be put in?
Okay, so the pump station itself, we do have a project currently that FEMA is looking at that will assist us in reinforcing that for flooding. It's actually up pretty high, but we want to add another couple of feet of protection around it. There's no intent to raise that. That's a very large pump station. Doesn't look like it, you know, but it's very large on the inside. The pumps for the creek itself, the city manages that, and I don't have an answer for you on, you know, what's being done with that. I apologize. Any other questions? Okay, Nick?
Thanks, Mario. All right, so now we're going to talk about another project at the treatment plant. This is the Fog Receiving Improvements Project. It's a small project, but important. So fog is fats, oils, and greases. That's material taken in from restaurants, material that we don't want flowing through the collection system because it causes a lot of maintenance problems. So it's delivered directly to the plant. Our current connection doesn't provide for very good screening. Our current connection is located basically in the same location we'll be placing this new facility. So our existing connection you offload into, it's a fixed screen. You know, a lot of debris passes through it, causes issues. So we're installing an advanced screening system in this new facility. So this is the new facility in plan. It's about 27 by 36. So not too large in size. It's going to house a screening unit, and then there'll be some buried storage, fog storage tanks that allow for additional processing time before it's transferred downstream. It is also located in a location that currently houses a buried fuel storage tank, which provides fuel to our emergency diesel generators that are located at the south end of the site. So you can see this is a pretty long distance. Also, buried fuel storage tanks aren't that popular anymore. So what we're doing is we're relocating them to the southern part of the site, closer to the generators. This area luckily is outside of the floodplain, but we're going to put them on a raised platform anyway, 2 feet above that 500-year storm elevation. So, you know, all but the most catastrophic events, this tank will not see any level of water at its installed elevation, so very safe. So that's the last project at the plant as part of this intermediate upgrades for the long-term control plan. Upcoming intermediate term projects, we have the Fairhaven CSO Improvements Initiative. So we're basically going to do an updated model of the Fairhaven area. So we're going to take real attributes from the sanitary sewers in the Fairhaven area, put them into our model, do an update of that model, and recalibrate it with real-world data taken from flow metering efforts to make sure that the model is accurate to today's terms. We're then going to run through a number of scenarios to determine weir height adjustments we can make within the CSO regulators to prevent CSO events from occurring and also protecting the public. To also bolster the system in this area and prevent CSO events from occurring in the current frequency, we're going to implement green infrastructure based on what the modeling results come back with. And then we have the wet weather flow conveyance from the west side of the harbor. So as Tom mentioned, we have two of our largest pump stations on the west side of the harbor. We have Boulevard and East Street pump station. Both of these pump stations pump into a single pipeline that crosses the harbor down to the East Shore facility to be treated. These pump stations are going to be upgraded. So we're talking more flow from peak wet weather events. So as part of that, we want to be as resilient and provide the maximum amount of conveyance as we can. So we're going to go through a study initiative to see what options are available to us to best facilitate additional flow conveyance, as well as making sure that it's resilient, reliable, and maintainable in the future. All right, so here's a map of the long-term control plan components. So a lot of this has been talked about before, but this is more of a display graphic to give you an idea of where these improvements are going to be happening. And we mentioned the Fairhaven CSO improvements. We talked about the plant upgrades. Mario went through those. And then also Boulevard was talked about. And then Union Street Pump Station, later on, that'll be upgraded to provide additional capacity from that pump station, additional flow conveyance. But then you'll see a lot of green infrastructure and storage call outs here. So we're going to continue on our effort to maximize green infrastructure around our CSO regulators, trying to minimize those events, and implement storage where necessary based on our modeling efforts. So in addition to our long-term control plan projects, I also wanted to go through some of our other projects that we're engaged with or soon to be engaged with, just so everyone's informed about what to expect in the near future. So Woodbridge Pump Station rehabilitation, that is a project that is occurring currently. Probably another year on that one. We're basically rehabilitating an existing pump station. That's aging. We're putting in a new standby generator. Providing new pumps. So basically a new pump station in place of the existing. Collection system maintenance facility, Mario touched on that at the plant, under construction currently. Whitney Museum Green Infrastructure Project. So this is a public benefit project. We're doing this in conjunction with the town of Hamden and RWA and the Eli Whitney Museum to redo a parking lot there. Implementing bioswales and other green infrastructure features that Tom talked about in our own parking lot at 260 East Street. And then we have the Westville Whaley Sewer Study. The first part of that study has been completed. We are going to be receiving some grant money to further analysis and try to make improvements in that area, try to improve wet weather performance in that part of the collection system. And then infiltration inflow improvements, Woodbridge areas 2, 2A, East Haven areas 15, 18, and 23. Very long name, lots of sanitary sewer that we're going to be lining and rehabilitating in various areas. We did an I&I study there, found we have a good deal of I&I. If we go ahead and line the sanitary sewers and rehab the manholes and keep the infiltration from coming into the system, that will further reduce the frequency of CSOs. A photo here on the right, real quick, just to reference, is what a pipe looks like after it's lined. So basically, they insert a fiberglass sock, invert it through the pipe, and then they use steam or hot water to cure it in place. and you end up with a pipe that looks like this, that's entirely renewed and good for another 50 years or more. And then also engage in another rehabilitation project, the 2024 Collection System Assessment and Rehab. That's various locations in New Haven. We kind of target some of our lowest performing sanitary sewers so they can be rehabilitated before, we see any issues with them. So that's about a mile of piping we'll be rehabbing in this project. And in the I&I improvements, Woodbridge in East Haven, that's about 25,000 linear feet. So lots of lining work to be seen in the near future. And then the last mention on this slide is the Riverside Interceptor Rehabilitation Upper. So currently, some of you might be aware, we're rehabilitating some sanitary sewer we're having issues with in the Marsh area in East Haven. We're going to continue that effort to make sure we don't see any failures in the future, so we're going to do more investigative work and additional lining efforts to renew that sewer. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mario.
So when is all this going to happen? We covered a number of projects. The intermediate term group, such as the East Street Pump Station, Yale Trumbull separation, Orchard separation, the process air compressors, and beginning our phase 1 work is in the next few years. So we should be starting the phase 1 at the treatment plant in a year. That's the design work, so don't expect the construction, but that'll include the odor control. We also will be doing the harbor conveyance from the west side to the east side study. That'll be starting in hopefully 24 as well. And believe it or not, our long-term control plan update will be starting with hydraulic modeling in 2025, which is not that far away. So we're kind of happy to be wrapping this phase up and getting ready for the next one. The longer term projects, Nick had mentioned the Fairhaven CSO phase 3. We already have some phase 2 work, which would be a couple of the regulators to install new ones. That will be starting out in the 28 time frame and followed by some wet weather conveyance construction from the west side of the harbor, whatever that looks like, as well as the Boulevard Pump Station improvements. And you might be wondering, why are these all kind of staggered? Again, you don't, even though these are different locations, obviously you have to be sensitive to rates because, you have to pay for this somehow. So we try to keep that as balanced as we can. The DEP has been a fantastic partner. If you're not aware, of other states are not as generous as Connecticut and the legislature in Connecticut in the use of grant money and the awarding of grant monies. Most states will have loan only. So thank you, DEP. We appreciate your assistance. That money's all, these costs, because this is historically City of New Haven's infrastructure, is also shared by the City of New Haven as well as the G&H WPCA customers. So the loan costs are shared. So we try to be sensitive to that. But really from a capacity standpoint, even from a personnel, we could go out and hire a bunch of consultants, and the few consultants who are here in the room would love that, and nothing more than love that. But we want to make sure that they were all coordinated and everything was happening so that our operations could continue. So by staging it in different segments at a time allows us to do a project, recognize what improvements are made, what need to be made. Is there a little roadblock that we hit on that project that we need to, okay, let's take that out. We'll just add it to the next one because it's a little too complicated. We have a couple of pieces of pipe that have taken us many years to complete the restoration of, just because of its location out in the middle of a pond. But we've done it, Took some time. So that's one of the reasons, and we're looking at doing this conveyance study so that we have locations where we can put more pumps, but if we can put a more resilient solution, a more sustainable solution in place that doesn't use the energy, then let's look at that option, and let's look at the short-term cost and the long-term benefit of that, especially if it allows us to take segments of piping out of use for maintenance so that we can go in different directions. But that's a study that someone else is going to be managing in the future. And then we have other projects that are out in the 29 to 2040 timeframe. At the very end, there's more studies that will be going on, more updates to the long-term control plan. We invite your input. If you have questions that are generated, if you don't have them now, please email us at engineering@gnhwpca.com. We'd really like to get those. We will probably pass them on to Gary Zrelik for the answers, because usually they're operational, and Gary is much better at putting those answers together. So if there are, so we're still on track to minimize the CSOs in the 2-year, 6-hour level of service. How does that compare with other communities? Across New England, many communities are on a 1-year storm instead of a 2-year storm. So we're at a higher bar that we're trying to reach, and we think that is achievable, albeit not so easy, but it is achievable. We still want to maximize the system storage, use the pipe capacity that we can for that short period of time when the rain comes in. Maximize the flow to the plant. And we think we've got a nice plan to take that extra flow and bring it around after primary treatment so that we have, we can make improvements to the Mill River and the West River and the Quinnipiac River. And then maximizing the capacity at the plant up to the 187 million gallon a day target. Any other questions? Yes. One second. Yes, I will. The question was, can I repeat the email address? It's engineering@gnhwpca.com. Thank you.
Hi. So I have a question about the fog. So are you increasing the capacity of the amount of fog that you treat? You talk about it going down line. It's being fed into the incinerator, is my understanding, after it's processed. And I just wanted to know if your effort to bring the tank above ground is going to increase its capacity so you can take more fog.
The tank moving above ground is the diesel fuel for the generators. Buried fuel storage tanks have a lifespan, and after so many years you have to replace them. The capacity at the fog is not an increase in capacity, it is an increase in treatment. And so that we're able to clean the fog more. And this is the grease that comes from the restaurants, essentially.
You do accept fog from other communities, though, I've understood.
We are a regional treatment plant, that is correct.
Yeah, okay. And the other question I have is, I was at the stormwater tour yesterday with Save the Sound in the City, and they put up a graph showing an area that looked like East Rock to me. It wasn't clear from the map, but they said that you had a current program for sewer separation in that vicinity of New Haven. Is that?
That's the Yale Trumbull Phase 2 project?
No, it looked more like it was, maybe it was the Eli Whitney area. I don't know, it was definitely close to the border with Hamden, and it was on the west side of the Mill River, so that's,
That would be the El Trumbull Phase 2 project. There is some work. The graphic was small, but we are doing work on Mechanic Street and Nash Street, which is an area that was done as a demonstration study many years ago, and we're finally able to incorporate that work for green infrastructure. That's the Nash and Mechanic Street area. So that's a little bit closer to where the area you're talking about, East Rock.
okay. So it's green infrastructure they're doing and not pipe separation? It wasn't clear from what they said, and they just said, oh, the sewer plant is doing this, and I thought, oh, okay. Well,
It is, we're doing it with the city, and it is, it's part of the sewer separation project, but it is bioswales. I believe there's 2 bump outs and about 8 bioswales and 3 or 4 infiltrating catch basins, if my numbers are right, but don't hold me to those. I might have different areas, different streets.
okay, thanks.
Okay.
And then a few years ago, when it's not raining, the amount of sewage coming into the plant was 23 million gallons a day. Is that still an accurate number?
It is rainfall, I think. Gary, if you would.
Okay, so it's gone up a little bit with the, yeah, I wanted to know that when it's not raining, how much fluid's coming in, not the annual average.
A dry day, our peak is around right now 38, 35 to 38, you know, and then 30 being about the average flow, probably a little less on a dry day, maybe that would be a 29, and then we'll get a low flow at night there where we'll hit 22, you know, 25 again. That low flow number at the middle of the night is always really weather dependent. You can see if it's been like, you know, last summer in 2022, August there, we had really a drought period there. We were hitting very low flows in 2021.
Okay, thank you. And then, is the data from the flow meters available to the public to see? I know there was some discussion that DEEP was going to put it up, and then it didn't happen, and I stopped looking, but are those available somewhere? Thank you.
Yes, the right to know law that's in place, all the sewer communities have been working with DEP. We're required to notify right away within hours of a CSO occurring. So we make a notification to DEP, and then within 5 days we update that notification with a volume, and that's an estimated volume. And then that gets followed up at the end of the month with a real number. So all that information is available on the DEP's website. I have the notes for that there, but if you go to Sewer Right to Know or DEP Sewer Right to Know in Google, it'll take you right to the page. And then there's a couple icons to click on below that'll take you to these active worksheets. And you can go through a historical query of not just New Haven, all the CSOs, communities in the state, and SSOs too, for sanitary sewer overflows. That means dry weather overflows. That's when a breakage of equipment occurs and there's a discharge of sewer by mistake. That's when a backup occurs and you have a manhole that overflows. Those are all in there too. So yeah, the system for notification has improved significantly. Yeah, that's on our website. And Gary, actually, the last several years is up there too. It should mention that. I thought you were looking for the one from DEP, but yes, we have our own. If you go to our website, you can see those.
I would like to know how often you test for leaks in the sewer pipes and for violators. I know that we have a caterer down the street, rather large caterer facility, wedding banquet facility. And I have a feeling that they're violating a few, dumping some waste that shouldn't be, including their stormwater from their parking lot. So I'm wondering if you guys do any testing or checking for violators, like storm
That's kind of a
runoff systems.
multifaceted
Yes,
question, and yeah, we do have our industrial tree pretreatment coordinator, and we have someone that's assigned to keeping an eye on it. I think I mentioned that, like the restaurants, making sure their grease traps are kept up to date. We do those like kind of random inspections, and then we do it based on what we see in the pipes. So for instance, if we're in the Morris Cove area, we notice a lot of fats, oils, and grease in the system. We'll figure out like, well, where's that coming from? We'll go to those restaurants, make sure that their systems are up to speed, and yes, we do enforce that, if you will. I think you asked one on the parking lot. That's more of a city issue because that's not a combined sewer over there. So they shouldn't be coming to us. If they did, we would be on top of that if we ever found out about it or we want to know about it. But chances are it'd be more of a city issue to be Giovanni's in with city engineering. But, both Giovanni and I communicate all the time, so we share that kind of information. So if something like that were occurring, we'd probably both be aware of it. Leaks in the system, leaks is an interesting term. Nick mentioned it, infiltration and inflow, we call it. So that's like when unwanted water is getting into the system. It could be someone's sump pumps in their basement connected illicitly to us. It could be just groundwater seeping into our system.
I know in front of my house, I had a leak for 15 years. It actually caused a major hole.
Leak in your lateral or into the system? The main. Oh, in the main. Yeah, and we have a process called collection, CMOM, Capacity Management Operations and Maintenance. So we have a robust program of not only our guys, but we actually have a contractor that goes around cleaning and TVing all those sewers. What we do is attack them systematically through various neighborhoods. That video gets witnessed by, the first triage is our operations guys see it. If they see something that looks unusual to them, there's a grading system for it. They grade all the pipes. If something is really obvious, they'll immediately notify engineering, let me notify, well, it's actually not me, but my guys, Nick and Ricardo Sabalos, and we have to make a decision at that point. Is it something that we fix immediately, go out and fix? We have our 8 on-call contractors will send it out, fix immediately. Sometimes that's the case. Is this something that needs needs like near-term attention? If that's the case, it usually goes into a lining project. Every year we're doing lining projects, generally up to 1 mile, 2 miles of sewer on an annual basis out of our capital program. So those problem areas will get dropped into that. So depending on what the issue is and what it is, if it's a partial failure on a dead-end road that has 2 houses connected, yes, we'll keep an eye on it. That's one we'll send operations group back to look at. Obviously, if it's creating sinkholes, those get addressed immediately. We have that in the city of New Haven.
This is an example, you missed it for 15 years. There was several issues with my home, neighboring homes. Stephen Mongill is very familiar with it. And you missed it several times after several complaints.
I have not received any complaints from that area, but if we do, I'd be happy to send somebody out tomorrow to go look at it, if that's the case.
And after several engineers were out, and I understand that the original system had engineering flaws where the neighboring pipes were directly across from mine, and they were broken.
Yeah.
So their pipe was out of sync to mine.
Sounds like a lateral failure.
Yes. It was a lateral. Over 15 years.
But to answer your question about leaks, because of the way the sewer systems exist, they're gravity fed. So really, the groundwater is leaking in much more than any sewage is leaking out. There's always, people are concerned, oh, there's a pipe leak out. Now, when you have a house connection that's broken, which is, sounds like it is,
No, it was the actual main that was kind of collapsed and wiggling around in there, and water was sort of going through there, but also creating a sinkhole around it.
okay, again, everything is moving inward as opposed to anything moving outward. So that's why the sand creates the void. But yeah, I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with where that is, but I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, our highest priority is keeping customers' sewage flowing. So if there's issue of broken laterals, that's usually the quickest thing. If it's on the customer's property, usually we help do with the investigation. If a drain cleaner's involved, you know, we're witnessing that sewer, our inspectors helping to witness that and to determine where it is. If it's in the street, then we take responsibility for it and we fix it as quickly as possible. So if there is an issue, we do want to know about it.
What year was that?
I would say it was 2023 now, that was probably 2018, 2019, you familiar with it?
Townsend.
Everything down along Hill, kind of down
It was
there.
right there on Townsend, like before Lighthouse. Or, yeah, Townsend right before Lighthouse. You'll see the patch of road that's been repaired several times because evidently you guys didn't do it right the first 3 times.
Not looking for that.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Laura Kahn. Thank you very much for doing this. Thank you all for being here. I chair the city board in New Haven that deals with environmental issues. We're
Yes.
called the Environmental Advisory Council. And I see that this meeting's a little sparsely attended. There's a Board of Alders meeting going on now and a lot of other things. Timing might have been a bit unfortunate, so I hope you're willing to take the show on the road. Perhaps if you would be willing to share this presentation, we could post it on our webpage of the city website, and I can send it to the 250 people I sent notification to about this meeting, and maybe that would get the information out, because I do appreciate that you're trying to educate your consumers. I do have a few comments. I hope you'll bear with me. I hope in future that with new technology and new possibilities, you will consider every opportunity to beautify your facilities. I see that your East Street pump house is quite, I mean, one wouldn't know what it was from the outside, and I appreciate that, but I hope that anything across from East Shore Park will be made as green and lovely as possible. Also, I hope you can try to monitor odors yourselves as well as expecting consumers to, because we have been tasked by every kind of entity that does business in New Haven, from oil companies to the electric company to, I can't even tell you all the other people who have asked us to notify them when we see something wrong. And I go around taking photos of all kinds of stuff and notifying people, but it's kind of a full-time job. So we do appreciate your meeting us halfway about that. I hope you will connect with the water company and please educate consumers about irrigating their lawns less. Usually watering lawns goes along with applying pesticides, and when you overwater your lawn, then it grows too much and you have to mow it more and blah, 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 and it puts more stress on the sewer systems because they're putting extra water into the sewer systems, and we're all paying for the privilege of their extra watering, and I really don't want to do that. I also don't like wasting water, so I hope you will convince people not to do that. And I know you can't control what people do. I realize that. And I also wonder if you use odor control chemicals, because there is a Yale athletic field right behind my house, and since they have installed a new water and sewer system, I have smelled what I know are chemical odor control smells. And it might be Yale doing that. It's probably not you, but I hope you will talk to them about it and ask them not to do that. And I'd like to know what those infiltrators look like. Are they like big white plastic septic tank looking things? Is that what they look like?
The infiltrating catch basins
Those.
that I mentioned?
The tanks, the ones that are more like septic systems?
So Tom referred to, in the developments,
Yeah,
we require them to have storage. So
Right.
that the first rainfall, and those are, you don't see them because they're buried.
no, I understand that, but you see, Yale put a new water and sewer system behind my house in this athletic field complex, and they put this big white storage tank, and I was wondering if that's what it is, because they use 200,000 gallons of water before every field hockey game and practice to water their plastic field, and I'm wondering if that's what, yes, she's laughing, it's really not funny, they're wasting so much water. 2,000 gallons. The 200,000 gallons a day is what they use on the golf course to irrigate, but I think at the moment they're not using municipal water, but 2,000 gallons of water a day before every game, every field hockey game or practice to water their plastic, and I'm just wondering if that's what they put in. I saw it while it was going in, this big white septic tank looking thing.
If it's solid, it's not an infiltrator. It would have had holes in it, and then a
I
lot of
didn't
those
see.
are proprietary systems. They could be plastic, sometimes they're concrete. So we don't dictate like what type of system, we just
Got
make
it.
sure it meets the design requirements. So it could have been,
Yeah.
but chances are, if you got to look at it, if it was a solid tank, it's probably a storage tank. If it had perforations in it and it was, they're generally somewhat modular. It wouldn't be like one, it'd be many units.
Okay, I don't think it was, but I took a picture, I'll go back and look at it. And anyway, those are some of my concerns, and I thank you for doing this, and I hope anytime you have anything you'd like to discuss with us, you are invited to come to the Environmental Advisory Council meetings. We meet on Zoom the first Wednesday of most months at 5:15 in the afternoon, just to make sure people who have to leave work have time to, finish their work days. And we're always happy to confer with our utility companies to make sure we are doing the best job we possibly can to help you with everything you do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just to answer your question, we are videotaping this. We intend to put it up on our website. We'll share that link with you when we get it up.
Yes, so if you signed in, if you leave your email address, you'll get that link to the website. So if you didn't enjoy it enough, you can enjoy it a second time.
Anything else?
I want to thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And,
Thank you.